Hey everyone, my name is Jennifer Woods. Woods as in the Fear Street Woods, because this week I'm going to do something that I've been wanting to do for a while now, and that is to talk about one of my absolute favorite authors as a child, R.L. Stine. The Fear Street books have already inspired a trilogy on Netflix, and I recently heard that they're going to be releasing The Prom Queen as a movie next. This is super exciting to me as a 90s kid. I read The Prom Queen by R.L. Stine in middle school and I loved it. The main character, Lizzy, was described as somewhat of a plain girl, as in she had brown hair, which in the early 90s was a plain girl trait. Maybe this resonated a little more with me because I had brown hair and considered myself a bit of a plain girl. Truthfully, I think what was most appealing to me about the Prom Queen was that these were just everyday girls doing everyday things. They weren't vampires or werewolves or being burned at the stake. I preferred the scary stories that were a little more down to earth, though I don't think there's anything really typical about living in a town where probably 50% of your class drops dead before graduation, and about 30% of the students are the ones responsible for that. But you have to allow for that when reading young adult thrillers. You have to grade them on a curve. So what I'm going to do in this video is go through the book chapter by chapter, touching on the main plot points. If you don't want spoilers, please keep an eye out for my fan trailer. The first chapter opens with Lizzy McVeigh and her friends Dawn Rogers and Rachel West getting dressed after gym class. You might remember that Dawn played a side role in the Fear Street book Bad Dreams as well. The school assembly where the Prom Queen nominees will be announced is about to start. The girls are talking about someone named Stacy whose bloody remains were recently found in the Fear Street woods. It was a senseless thing, and the mood is somber. Well, aside from the fact that Lizzy's friend Dawn is cracking jokes and getting the background noise characters really going. Lizzy is intuitive enough to understand it's likely a coping mechanism, but considering the audience this book is geared to, she could probably save her armchair psychology lesson. We're just waiting for the real action to start. Rachel is offended by the jokes because her cousin knew the ill-fated teen. She's basically being that girl who knows someone who knew a dead girl and thinks that makes her important. Rachel, by the way, lives on Fear Street, and her parents can't afford to buy a security system, so that's where she's at. Oh, and Lizzy had a boyfriend named Kevin, but he moved in January because, according to our droll narrator, his dad's in the military. She says he likely won't be coming home for the prom because his father wants him to adjust to his new home. By the way, Lizzy makes a total dad joke in this chapter. She calls her boyfriend's military father a major bummer. That's hilarious. You can't see me, but I'm practically falling out of my chair laughing. At the school assembly, the principal, who is said to resemble a Jim Henson creation, announces the 5 Prom Queen nominees, and surprise, surprise, our leading lady is one of them. The other 4 are Dawn, Rachel, some drama queen named Simone Perry, and some prim rich named Alana Potter. The principal reveals that the prom will take place at an infamous manor that sits in the middle of the Fear Street woods called Halsey Manor House. The principal is surprised at the chirping crickets that follow this announcement. Apparently, the student body is not thrilled at the idea of hanging around some victim's unofficial gravesite. And I admit, it does seem like a bit of a tone-deaf decision on the part of the school administration. I guess I can also understand his shock at their less than joyful response. This is Shadyside High. That's like the Gen X of high schools. I would expect them to have a thick skin about this kind of thing by now. As for how I would feel in their situation, well, let's just say I'd rather party at Halsey Manor than listen to the singer Halsey, and we'll leave it at that. The chapter ends with the 5 nominees deciding to go out for pizza to celebrate. Also, we find out that Simone is dating a Shadyside High jock named Justin, who would make an excellent milkman, but not such a great boyfriend. Simone flips after seeing Justin talking to some girl named Meg. If you read The Surprise Party, you know who Meg is. Oh, and I just want to give a shout out to the lady who gives the announcement about overdue fees being waived on library books for the week. I love it. This bit of info serves no purpose other than to make it seem like you're attending an actual school assembly. I mean, it's still early. Who knows? Overdue library fees could become a crucial plot point later on. Maybe the reason why the bad guy goes insane. But I get the feeling that that might be the last time we hear about it. In the next chapter, we learn that Simone is memorizing lines for her upcoming role of Maria in the school production of The Sound of Music. The director is some guy named Robbie Barron. That name means nothing to me at this point, aside from the fact that he sounds like a student. Rachel has a boyfriend named Gideon, who seems to think that if his girlfriend becomes prom queen and wins the scholarship award, she'll be walking around with some extra pocket money to spend on dinner out. While at Pete's, the girls talk in circles for a bit. Finally, they land on the subject of prom queen speeches. Lizzy gets the brilliant idea that they should imitate each other giving their individual speeches. Simone goes first. Lizzy has already stated that Simone is a bit of a funny girl. So far, I don't see it, unless being funny means telling a dad joke or doing a very basic impression of the male species. Simone thinks that if Dawn wins, she will just pump her fist a lot and talk about how wonderful she is. Dawn goes next. She thinks Simone will ramble on and on about the fact that she is an actress. Alana reminds them all that Rachel is financially struggling. Rachel reminds them that Alana is not struggling financially at all. So now the gloves are off. They never get around to imitating Lizzy's speech. Maybe because, as the protagonist, she's the boring one. The chapter ends with Simone freaking out over something. We don't find out what has set her off until chapter 3. As it turns out, Simone is angry because she caught sight of Justin talking to some blonde named Vanessa next to a fountain just outside Pete's. You would think that by now she'd be used to it. With Simone out of earshot, Dawn admits to the other three that she went out with Justin just recently. Alana is shocked. Rachel admits that Justin also asked her out and she accepted the invitation. Alana is even more shocked. Lizzy is a good girl who agrees that Justin is hot, but would only date him with Simone out of the picture. That sounds a little bit like a threat, Lizzy. Cut to play rehearsal. Simone is late. Director Robbie is skipping around on the stage doing a ridiculous imitation of her as Maria. Lizzy is doing set design. Her parents don't want her out and about at night with a shadowy man on the loose, but they're willing to risk it for the sake of this production. A student named Eva uses a payphone to make a call to the Perry household. Remember, this was the early 90s. The author had to go to a lot of trouble to make this call happen. Luckily, Robbie had some coins in his pocket. But no one answers the phone. So now Simone is making Lizzy risk her life for nothing and wasting precious money in the process. Lizzy decides that she will go out into the dark hallway and single-handedly hunt Simone down. The school is a ghost town at this hour, yet she seems to think that she'll just bump into Simone by her locker or curled up in a chair in the library. Instead, she ends up locked in a stairwell. This, by the way, is a common trope in movies, and I guess in young adult horror books as well. I call it panic in a public stairwell. Lizzy screams out for help. She hears someone's footsteps on the other side of the gymnasium door and just assumes it's someone with bad intent. Seems a bit extreme. But then, this is the town where maybe 50% of the student population will end up dead by graduation, and maybe 30% will admit to having homicidal tendencies that they've already started acting on. Turns out it is only the maintenance man who has come to bail Lizzy out. She doesn't immediately return to play rehearsal. She will soon find out it was canceled anyway. In the parking lot now, she decides to ask Dawn if she's seen Simone. Dawn is at tennis practice. Just as she thinks of Dawn, her friend starts walking from the tennis court to her car. She's acting weird. She gives Lizzy the cold shoulder, and when Lizzy basically hurls herself at Dawn's car, she realizes that her friend's face is all scratched up. Dawn says she got up close and personal with a fence, and that's how they leave it. I'm not really clear about what time it is because the school has been completely abandoned by this point and the hallways are dark, and also the tennis court is lit up. This is late April, so it's not the dead of winter. That makes me think it's after 7 or 8. I've never heard of tennis practice taking place that late, and I have no idea why Lizzy thinks Simone would be hanging around the abandoned school at this hour if not for play rehearsal. On the ride home, Lizzy decides to swing by Simone's house. The Perrys have just arrived home and figure Simone must be up in her room. Lizzy goes up there to check on her and opens the door to total chaos. A stuffed bear's head has been torn off and the room is in a complete mess as though there's been a struggle within these 4 walls. Even worse, there's a huge blood stain on the carpet. Lizzy looks out the window in time to see a man running through the backyard with a bag large enough to conceal a body in his hand. He disappears into the woods. The police want the remaining 4 Prom Queen nominees, Justin, Robbie, and Simone's parents, in the same room together so they can question them all at the same time. Apparently, all 5 nominees were really good friends. No way would a circle of 5 friends all be nominated for Prom Queen. Aren't there any other eligible female students who aren't in their close circle? But they're the only people in the universe as far as this book is concerned. Aside from Simone's dillweed boyfriend, her parents, and the director of the school play. And the police seem to think the most logical way to interview them is to have them all show up at the Perry's house and be interrogated together. Mrs. Perry makes cookies for the occasion, but Robbie is shunned by the others for thinking they're on the table to be eaten. It's clear why Justin and the parents are there, and Lizzy was the first to stumble on the crime scene, so she's an obvious suspect too. We find out, though, that Robbie and Simone had a fight earlier, so he can't be ruled out as a potential suspect either. As Lizzy is leaving the house, the reader is introduced to a creep named Lucas Brown. Lizzy says he's often depressed, but all I see is lots of joking around about extremely tragic things. He enjoys reading stories about death. What a monster, right? Lucas, as it turns out, used to date Simone. It's unclear why someone like Simone would ever bother with a guy like Lucas. Lizzy speculates that her friend merely did it to get close to Justin, who was a member of the same baseball team. But we already know Justin will chat up just about anyone with legs. I think the author just knew the suspect pool was about to get thin, and he wanted to beef it up a bit. Lucas's sole purpose in this book is to harass Lizzy and let her know he's interested. Lizzy later tells Rachel and Dawn that he called her up to ask her to the prom. She's also remembered that the shadowy person she saw running from the Perry house was wearing a maroon jacket, as though he were on the baseball team. Lucas is on the baseball team. Could Lucas be their guy? The 3 girlfriends are on their way to the mall to look at prom dresses. Dawn is as blasé about Simone's disappearance as she was about Stacy's shedding of her mortal coil. Lizzy decides to stop by the Perry's house to ask about how the case is going. Remember, this was the early 90s when people just dropped by a random person's house on a whim, whether it was to bring over a plate of cookies or just to say, "Hey, have they found your daughter's body yet?" No news, Mr. Perry says, other than that the police suspect his daughter's case could be linked to Stacy and some other girl named Tina. By the way, in this chapter, and also in a later one, a reference is made to Lisa Bloom, who was first introduced in the debut Fear Street novel, The New Girl. Apparently she's been spreading rumors about the band hired for prom. Dawn only wants to talk about the prom and denies that Simone was ever actually a good friend of theirs. So why do they care that she's missing? Could Dawn be the guilty one? Nah, she's got the motivation and the callousness necessary and is too obvious a suspect. At the dress shop, Dawn proves to be particularly insufferable when she rips a stunning black dress right out of Lizzy's hands and insists on buying it for herself. Lizzy isn't sure why she's even friends with Dawn, but I know why. It's because it's what teenagers do. Befriend rotten girls who make them miserable. After shopping, they go to a movie. It's a Christian Slater film. Lizzy runs into every Fear Street fan's favorite lady, Miss Suki Thomas. She's described as having platinum spikes, and I picture her looking a little like Roxette, or maybe like Billy Idol. She reminds me of Joan from Christopher Pike's Chain Letter. Of course she's on a date with Justin, because that's pure Suki. Dawn gets up during the movie to go to the restroom. Rachel goes out to look for her when she doesn't return and comes rushing back into the theater to let Lizzy know something horrible has happened. Out in the lobby, Lizzy finds Dawn lying on the floor. It looks like she's dead at first, but there's no blood, so then Lizzy assumes that she's fainted. The theater manager and an usher are tending to her. For some reason, one of them gets a cup of soda. I don't know what they're planning to do with it. Splash it on her face? That's a $50 soda. Why not just get water from the fountain or something? But nothing comes of it, so apparently it's a useless piece of info. They use smelling salts to bring her back to full consciousness. She reveals that she was struck by a man shortly after entering the theater on her way back from the restroom. Odd that nobody heard anything and that she was just lying there until Rachel went looking for her and apparently went to get an usher to drag Dawn out into the hallway. And even during that commotion, nobody heard anything. This is all very weird. The girls are offered free passes to another show. It's the least the manager can do since they didn't even get to finish this showing. But he acts like he's doing them some enormous favor. The girls aren't thrilled at the prospect of returning. At home, Lizzy reads a letter that just arrived from her boyfriend Kevin. No plans as of yet to come back to Shadyside for the prom, but guess what? His mother was in an accident and didn't die. My guess is he was using the part about his mother's accident as a way to shock Lizzy and make her forget the part about not coming home for prom. That's real classy, Kev. She tries to do her homework, but it starts to thunder and lightning. A rain cloud opens up shortly after. She starts to curl up in bed, but decides to use this time to write Kevin a letter instead. Lizzy frets over whether she should one-up his injured mother with the news about Simone, but she decides against it and leaves the letter unwritten because her father stops by her room and wants to play chess. For some reason, having her friend knocked out in the back of the theater and finding out in the same day that her boyfriend is making friends somewhere else and not coming back for prom hasn't put her in a chess-playing mood. She gets a call from Rachel. Rachel is frantic and begging Lizzy to help her. I'm not sure why, if she's in mortal danger, she's calling a 17 or 18-year-old girl and not the police. But Lizzy rushes out of the house to save her friend. While driving to Rachel's house, she hits something in the road and freaks out. Turns out it's just a raccoon. As it turns out, Rachel isn't being butchered by a madman. She's only been stabbed in the heart by Alana and her no-good-now ex-boyfriend Gideon. Rachel seems to be forgetting that she was the one who cheated on Gideon not too long ago with Justin. Lizzy seems to have forgotten as well. Up until that night, she thought Rachel and Gideon's relationship was so steady and stable. Lizzy is annoyed at first that this is what she went out driving in the rain and running over raccoons for. Rachel says she wanted to tell the whole story on the phone, but the line cut out due to the storm. Those darn phone lines always cutting out at the worst time. Lizzy returns home and finds out from her father that the bad guy has been caught. No word yet about what became of Simone, but they caught the guy responsible for Stacy and Tina. They can now relax with a chocolate bar and some skim milk, because in the 90s, it was always important to drink your milk. Lizzy is awakened in the middle of the night by the police at her door. They tell her that she was the last one to see her friend Rachel alive. That's a lie, by the way. She was not. Rachel's parents were the last ones to see her alive. The next chapter skips ahead in time. The funeral has come and gone. Almost no one came. Who were all the people who voted for Rachel for prom queen then? I guess we now know that she never would have won anyway. Lizzy is in the prop room at the end of the catwalk, making sure everything is accounted for. It's sad that her friend died young, but the show must go on. Enough time has passed that Robbie thinks it's appropriate to come up behind Lizzy and fake shoot her with a prop gun. Lizzy just shrugs it off. Those jokes are tired. Something we learn about Lizzy in this chapter is that she's very particular about closing doors and drawers behind her. She makes a point of that. We learn a lot about Lizzy in this book. Like, for instance, in an earlier chapter, we learned that she loves pigs for some reason. For some reason, a pig is her favorite animal, even though she later reveals that she's not much of a fan of Justin, and Justin, as we all know, is a pig. Dawn is playing Simone's role in the play because apparently Dawn can do everything. She's a little weirded out to think about the fact that she's wearing a costume previously worn by a dead girl. She has this theory that the person who went after Simone and now Rachel is targeting all of the prom queen nominees. She and Lizzy discuss possible motives. Then, after Dawn heads down to the stage to continue with rehearsal, Lizzy has a frightening thought. Dawn seems more than happy to be taking over Simone's role in the school play. Could she be the bad guy? Old news. We've already determined Dawn is too strong a suspect and is therefore completely innocent. Lizzy goes down to lower the set and is surprised when a sandbag falls on top of Dawn. By the way, having an object fall on the head of an actor during a play is a favorite way to take someone out in these books. Something similar happened in Chain Letter by Christopher Pike as well. So 2 of Lizzy's friends have been erased from the earth by a maniac. Her friend Dawn was almost smushed by a sandbag, and Robbie has no clue why these 2 girls are freaking out beside him. This whole situation kind of reminds me of Gainesville a little bit. And when students started dying in Gainesville, Florida in 1990, everyone's life stopped. Kids were dropping out of school, buying new locks, arming themselves. But in Shadyside, ain't no thing. Lizzy decides she's had it and races out of the auditorium. She figures she won't feel so bad about her friends being dead and Robbie being an a-hole once the rain quits, but for now, between all that's going on and the crappy weather, she can't take it. She gets in her car and drives away. She's startled when she finds out there's someone hiding in the back seat. Next chapter. What do you know? It's Lucas. Bet you didn't see that one coming. She drives Lucas back to school and forces him out of the vehicle. Then she drives home to find that her parents are not there. But guess who is? Justin Stiles. He's sitting at her kitchen table. Is there any guy in this school who isn't a stalker? He claims her parents let him in before leaving the house. She knows they did have to pick up her aunt, so his story checks out. He starts by saying that he wants to make sure she won't be telling anyone about his date earlier with Suki. He just doesn't want word to get around. You know, for Suki's sake. The tender-hearted dear. But then his true motivations come out when he tries to make a pass at Lizzy. She rebukes him. She tells him he's a real a-hole for how he treated Simone, and he's not too pleased to hear it. She has a bad dream about the prom queens. They're all standing on stage with the skin rotting off their faces. Her parents reassure her that it was only a nightmare. Apparently they've forgotten as well that Rachel and Simone are actually rotting in their graves as we speak. The next chapter opens with Lizzy passing on the shepherd's pie in the school cafeteria. Aside from the bits of spaghetti, it sounded tasty. She must be a picky eater. She sticks with a yogurt and salad. She seems to think that's food. The whole time Lucas is standing beside her, being a pest. She chooses not to sit with Dawn and Alana at lunch because she doesn't feel like making the shadow man's job easy for him. Instead, she sits with a freshman boy who's gobsmacked at his luck. The best she could think of to say to him is that she's glad it's Friday. He talks her ear off. She learns that he's not a fan of PE, but he is a fan of ending the life of a certain gym teacher. She's discouraged by his words. She was hoping there was someone in the school who wasn't out for blood. Then again, if that's what she's looking for, she enrolled in the wrong school. Her boyfriend Kevin's father was smart. He got his son out of there before it was too late. Alana convinces Lizzy to join her outside, which sounds a bit menacing when put like that. The two girls talk. Alana is actually wearing something normal on this particular day, something that doesn't make her sound like she does housework in her spare time. A long sweater and leggings. That seems to be the typical outfit for the Fear Street teen, but then this is the early 90s. Stine misspells the word scrunchy. Alana is feeling guilty that she stole Rachel's boyfriend right before Rachel took a large bite out of a dust sandwich. Lizzy is too nice to tell her that she's right. She is a horrible human being. Instead, she comforts her. Alana seems genuinely sorry. It's the day they all give their prom queen speeches. The girls get a standing ovation. And later that day, Lizzy arrives at the school auditorium early to work on the set for the play and make sure everything is in order. She stumbles upon Alana's dead body in the middle of the stage. So Lizzy has just stumbled on 2 crime scenes and was inaccurately accused of being the last person to see Rachel alive. If she wasn't the narrator, I would be thinking some thoughts about Lizzy right about now. The maintenance man enters the auditorium and Lizzy screams at him to call an ambulance. He stares back at her like he does not understand. Somehow he misses the body on the stage and the blood everywhere. But she finally gets his attention when she shrieks the words at him again. Apparently Alana fell from the catwalk. Maybe she was doing a little dance to Right Said Fred and lost her footing. Or maybe she was pushed. Lizzy and Dawn are now absolutely convinced they're next on the mystery man's list. The police question them and seem overall unconcerned about their safety. The girls are advised to take precautions. Dawn responds to this advice by driving home alone. At night. Lizzy watches from the window, well aware that the shadowy man is lurking out there somewhere. She thinks it's Lucas. Alana was clutching a piece of someone's maroon jacket in her final grip. After being questioned by the cops, but right before Dawn left the McVeigh's house, Lizzy told her friend that she resigned as prom queen. Earlier, they were all saying they should go on with the competition because that's what the 2 girls currently pushing up daisies would want. That was the speech from Alana that got them the standing ovation. Their bravery and their willingness to make a sacrifice for the sake of their 2 poor, eternally resting friends. Now Lizzy legit doesn't care. The crown's not worth her life. Around 11 that night, Lizzy is awakened by the ringing phone. For some reason, her parents and aunt sleep right through it, and it's just as well because it's Justin on the other end. He says he's coming over to talk. Lizzy heeds the cops' sage advice about taking precautions by reluctantly agreeing. What they said was to be as careful as possible, and this is as careful as she possibly can be because Justin isn't leaving her much choice. She tells him he can't come over because the alarm is set. He tells her to turn it off, and so she does. When he arrives, he's acting very weird, pacing around her den with her father's scary-looking letter opener in his hand, asking her what she told the cops. She realizes that Justin could also have been the guy in the maroon jacket she saw leaving Simone's place the night things turned upside down, so he could also be the monster she fears. I feel like this is something she should have already considered by this point. Justin's place on the baseball team and his connection to Simone, not to mention his connection to Rachel and Alana too, was never a mystery. He gives her a charming smile and asks her to come a little closer. She's standing too far away. When she refuses, he takes a few steps toward her. And even at 11, I knew he was flirting. But Lizzy thinks he's going to send her downstream on a boat to Hades. Lizzy's father interrupts them, and Lizzy is relieved to be able to tell Justin that her dad has spoken and it's time for him to get lost. Justin tells her father he had come over to ask her something. Even though he says he asked it already, she knows he really hasn't. So she's uneasy all night. She avoids Justin at school for a while. The good news is that she recently got a letter from Kevin saying he can come to the prom after all. The prom is just days away. Will she make it until then? Only time will tell. Now it's time for the dress rehearsal of The Sound of Music. It goes really badly, but Lizzy says that according to tradition, that's good. The dress rehearsal should be an absolute disaster so that it can be smooth sailing on opening night. Whatever you say, Lizzy. Justin corners Lizzy up in the prop room after the rehearsal. He is anxious to ask her the question he wanted to ask her the other night. Turns out he wanted to know if she had a date to the prom. So he wasn't a maniac after all, just yet another dirty little stalker boy. She tells him she's got a date with Kevin for the prom, but thanks anyway. Dawn is disappointed to hear that Lizzy won't be going to prom with Justin. They're getting ready to go home. Everyone else is gone. Dawn is impatient. And then, when Lizzy calls out to her to say she's almost ready, she hears Dawn scream in horror. Dawn is being attacked by a man in the wings. The man in the maroon jacket. She puts up a mighty fight, but she fails. The knife comes down and emerges with blood all over it. Lizzy is horrified. The maniac has stepped into the light and she can see who it is now. No, not Simone. She's dead. Or is she? The raven-haired drama queen is a disgrace to Gen X. She whines about how nobody loves her, her parents don't care, Justin doesn't care, and here I was feeling so bad for her devastated mother and father. But after this performance of hers, I'm starting to second-guess myself. Is it possible that they'll be better off without her? Maybe she really did do them a favor by making them think she was dead. I'm so confused. As it turns out, Simone wasn't trying to off the prom queens. Her beef was with the girls who went out with Justin behind her back. She says she's almost done with what she set out to do. Yeah, right. She's still got about 50 more girls to go before she can call it quits. Not that I agree with Simone's ultimate logic. She shouldn't have taken her anger out on others. That's the bottom line. Just making that clear. I'm being glib, but I do not condone the actions of Simone. All I'm saying here is that her math isn't mathing. Maybe she missed too many days of school. Simone says she spent the entire time hiding out in the prop room. She heard the whole interaction between Justin and Lizzy, which means she should have heard Lizzy tell Justin she was going to prom with Kevin. But apparently Simone didn't hear that part. Or maybe at this point she doesn't care. Lizzy's a witness and her eyes must be closed for good. At the last minute, Lizzy remembers the sandbag. Apparently, after nearly crushing Dawn the other day, they put it back up there, so now it can fall all over again. Hopefully on someone who deserves it this time. Lizzy tries to remember which rope to pull to release the sandbag of doom. She picks the right one. The monstrosity lands on Simone's foot. Simone is crippled by the pain, but not for long. She makes one last attempt to squeeze the life out of Lizzy, but Dawn resurrects and gives her a good jab in the leg. As it turns out, Dawn's fine. She was wearing Lizzy's jacket, and it must have provided enough padding or something to save the day. In the final chapter, Lizzy is at the prom with Kevin. He's so happy to spend the night dancing with her, even if it is at Halsey Manor House. The girls chose not to go forward with the competition. With 2 girls lost forever, a 3rd one likely on her way to the big house, and Lizzy and Dawn barely escaping with their own lives, the thrill of it all is gone. Lizzy is wearing the black dress Dawn snatched from her earlier. Dawn is a hit with the boys. Life is good. At the prom, Dawn dances off into a future that does not include the likes of Simone, Rachel, Alana, and Lizzy, or any of the events that transpired over the past 160-something pages. Justin, however, earned his right to continue to exist in our world. We will see them both again in the Fear Street book Bad Dreams. Of all the Fear Street books, the Prom Queen stands out as one of the better ones, even though it does have its eye-roll moments, its dad jokes, and its cringy false alarms and cliffhangers at the end of almost every chapter. My favorite anticlimactic moment is a tie between the hit-and-run raccoon and Rachel saying to Lizzy that she couldn't just tell her about the breakup over the phone because the line went dead. I give this book 4.5 stars. I'm grading it on a curve. 1 star for each dead girl, and 0.5 star for the dead raccoon. I don't grade books based on how many people die in them. That's just how it worked out. And now for the final numbers. Body count, 2. I'm not counting Stacy and the other girl Tina because they're not from Shadyside High. I'm also not counting the raccoon because those animals take their lives in their hands when they dash into the road like that. It sucks, but it's the circle of life. In all fairness, if I were to tell my now late grandmother about those cursed Shadyside teens and how they can't seem to stop dying, she'd probably say the same thing to me. That's life. People come and people go. Nothing special about that. Kiss scenes, 0. I was so hopeful that Lizzy and Justin would get together when I was in middle school, but I realize now he was a creep. And not just because he cheated on his girlfriend and turned her into a homicidal maniac. He was just a weirdo who couldn't ask Lizzy to the prom over the phone during daylight hours. He had to call her up late at night, wake her up, and come on over just to scare her with a letter opener. And then not even ask her the freaking question. Memorable death scenes. 1. After reading this book, I can't hear the word catwalk without thinking about poor Ilana and her ruined face. Dad jokes. Honestly, I lost count. Cameo appearances. The ones I noticed were Suki Thomas, Lisa Bloom, Meg Dalton, and possibly Sherry Paulson, though I can't find any evidence of her in other books when doing an internet search. As for Mr. Brandt's scholarship, I assume he is Gary Brandt's father. Gary is also a regular. I plan to reread all of my Fear Street books, so I will keep better track of these counts going forward. Thank you for joining me today, and have a great night.